had the realization recently I could just reorientate my camera. So there you go. We're doing some real shit now. So we haven't really done a response video in quite a while now. I mean, we haven't really done a video at all in quite a while, but especially a response one. So I figured to ease ourselves back into the swing of things, why don't we pick on PragerU for a bit? I mean, you can't really go wrong with that, can you? So let's take a look at what they're up to. Okay, pretty standard stuff. And ooh, capitalism versus socialism. Let's see what's going on here.
Venezuela.
Whoa, okay, it's well, that might be a bit much for me. Don't want to get too blown the fuck out, you know. Let's take a look at what else they got. Oh, okay, who is Karl Marx? Yeah, that's probably more my pace. I shouldn't have to deal with any instances of socialism there, right? I mean, I guess it is more up my street. I guess I could do it, but fuck, I'm kind of regretting this already. Do I really have to? Wait, shit, do you guys? Oh, for fuck.
Ideas have consequences. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, and sometimes catastrophic, like the ideas of Karl Marx. Born in Trier, Germany in 1818, Marx didn't invent communism, but it was on his ideas that Lenin and Stalin built the Soviet Union, Mao built communist China, and innumerable other tyrants, from the Kims in North Korea to the Castros in Cuba, built their communist regimes. Ultimately, those regimes and movements calling themselves Marxists murdered about 100 million people and enslaved more than 1 billion.
And like any good PragerU video on communism, we're coming right at it with the death statistics and the dictatorships and all the standard stuff, really. What I especially love, though, is quite unique to PragerU, this 1 billion people enslaved, because I can only assume that they're making the assumption that to have lived under communism is the same as being property. When really, of course, we know that it's actually really the capitalist countries that excelled in that department. You know, I'm not going to say that maybe living under those countries was great and all, but slavery, I mean, come on, PragerU, even you've got to like step back a little bit on that one. But what I especially love, right, about you know, all of these conservatives that really just kind of open up the bat whenever the notion of Marx is even brought up. You know, we're talking about the dictatorships, we're talking about the slavery and the deaths, which of course, you know, many of those deaths did happen, even if these guys can't even decide what number exactly of deaths it was, but nonetheless. What I really love about it is this is something really unique to Marx, right? Because there are loads of political and philosophical thinkers in history that people have then taken and applied to the real world, and there have been bad consequences about that. But it's really only Marx who ever actually gets held accountable for any of that, right? There are obviously countless deaths that happened at the hand of liberal democracy, obviously. Even if we just want to go for the obvious ones, all the wars that the US has been engaged in, you know, the US is liberalism, so hey, John Stuart Mill or whatever other fucking Enlightenment thinker, you're responsible for all the deaths of the US. I mean, it really doesn't make any sense when you start to kind of flip this on its head a little bit. Because I mean, if you want to come up with this argument that like whoever comes up with philosophical ideas or political systems is then responsible for what people do with them, then sure, you know, you can go with that if you really want to, but at least be consistent about it, guys. I mean, come on, because I already know that every liberal and conservative is in the comments right now is just furiously typing away about, oh, you know, it's not real capitalism, it's not real liberalism, it doesn't count because blah blah blah. I don't give a shit. Because guess what? Not true socialism, it works just for the same not true capitalism. Like, come on.
Marx believed that workers, specifically those who did manual labor, were exploited by capitalists. Only a workers' revolution, Marx wrote in Das Kapital, could correct this injustice.
I have read all 3 fucking volumes of Capital.
No, you haven't.
Why
are you lying?
Only the true fans are going to get that one.
What would that revolution look like? Marx and his collaborator Friedrich Engels spelled it out point by point in the Communist Manifesto. It included the abolition of property and inheritance, and the centralization of credit, communication, and transport in the hands of the state, and a lot more along the same lines.
Oh boy, okay, the 10 pillars of communism. Now, this is actually the first instance in this video that we're going to see PragerU quite abuse this to kind of push a certain narrative, and that actually as I was talking about earlier, where it seems that Marx is the only one who like uniquely is pinned for all of these deaths under supposedly communist countries, this really right here is what they're going to use to justify doing this specifically to Marx, right? So let's give some context on what this actually is first. So the 10 pillars of communism is this kind of it's from the Communist Manifesto, right? It's under the subtitle, you know, how will we enact the revolution or something along those lines. And what it is, right, is this kind of like rough guide that Marx and Engels put up specific to their time and specific to their countries and part of the world that would kind of help bring society closer towards socialism, right? Not actually attain socialism at all. It's what they thought that if a revolution were to happen right now, which was incredibly likely at the publication of the Communist Manifesto, then this is probably what they would want to immediately enact that would kind of get them on the way towards there, right? It's not this timeless step-by-step guide, okay, for people to pick up and then suddenly carry out in their country and then boom, we have socialism. This is actually kind of why I don't really like the Communist Manifesto too much, because it's so much of it is just detached from the modern world. I mean, it's all right, it's got some good stuff in there, it's written nicely, but it's for shit like this, which is why I actually discourage newer leftists and especially conservatives from actually reading it, because it's just not a good starting point to kind of get your head around what communism is. Because here's the thing, right? What really separated Marx from basically any other political philosopher ever is that he wasn't trying to make a specific ideal of society for people to live by, okay? He wasn't trying to make rules and then suddenly a utopia would emerge out of his very complex and finely specified system. He was actually just making very broad analyses of pre-existing capitalist society and then extrapolating on for that, saying, okay, so based on all of this, it probably looks like some society like this is going to emerge out of it, and we'll call that socialism. That's literally all it was. Okay, the only time that Marx could ever come up with this step-by-step guide is when he was talking about his specific situation. And actually, one of the amazing things that Lenin did, and you know why he was considered such a great Marxist, is because he took these core ideas of Marxism and he applied them to his own time in his own context, which was radically different from when Marx was writing. So you'll notice that Lenin didn't just, unlike what this video is going to say, Lenin didn't just take the Communist Manifesto, tick off a fucking checklist, and then say, okay, we have communism now. No, he had to like actually adapt to his own unique conditions, just like every other revolutionary ahead of him, because every revolution is different from the last and has to take on different rules. Okay, so this is really something that is very important. I know I'm going on about it a lot because it is very important in the context of this video, because again, what they're going to do further on is they're going to say, or imply at least, that Marx gave out this guideline and this was the core of Marxism, and then people just applied it in their countries and then suddenly death happened. But I mean, obviously with PragerU we can assume things are just a little bit more nuanced than what they imply.
This notion was widely discussed and debated in European intellectual circles during Marx's lifetime, but nothing much came of it until Vladimir Lenin took power in Russia in 1917. This changed everything. Despite its repeated economic failures, Lenin's Russia, which became known as the Soviet Union, became the model for dictators around the world. Wherever Marx's ideas were practiced, life got worse. Not by a little, but by a lot.
That's just categorically wrong. You see, this is why I hate PragerU more than anything, because they force me to do something I really don't like doing, and that's defending like the USSR and things like that, because it's just the most wrong statement. The USSR, they went from a backwater third world semi-feudalist country to one of the most powerful countries in the world, and still are one of the most powerful countries in the world, purely because of the industrialization that happened under the USSR that was so rapid that it's unparalleled in history, right? And again, this isn't communism, but to just kind of casually throw out there that life got worse, it's just wrong.
There is not a single exception to this rule. Not the Soviet Union, not Eastern Europe, not China, not North Korea, not Vietnam, not Cuba, not Venezuela, not Bolivia, not Zimbabwe. Wherever Marxism goes, economic collapse, terror, and famine follow.
And you know, here's another thing, right? So even if we want to grant them every claim that they just made there, we want to take this completely at face value, it's still wrong, right? Because even if we want to say that these countries are just the worst of the worst, people literally were all enslaved who lived there, it completely negates like more than half of all attempts to build socialist societies, which actually, even if they didn't attain socialism in like my definition or whatever, then they were still like way better off for having revolutions or having governments that were like, actively pushing for socially orientated policies, as some people might call it, I suppose. The Paris Commune, the German communes, the revolutionary Catalonia, there were communes like all over Europe and Asia throughout the first half of the 20th century, and then, you know, Chile as well even. Yeah, all of these places, right? Again, I wouldn't call them socialism, but to say that every single attempt at socialism has always resulted in famine, in dictatorship and terror and blah blah blah, it's just factually wrong. And even if you want to come at it again with like, oh well, they only lasted a few months or years in some cases or whatever, again, yeah, that's true. And like that's valid criticism, but not when your original point was that every attempt has resulted in terror. Not then, because then you're just making a different point, you're moving the goalposts. So just stop.
So if cataclysmic failure, meaning terrible human suffering, is the inevitable legacy of Marxism, why do so many people, and now especially young people, defend it? The most common answer Marxism's advocates offer is that they, whoever they are, Lenin, Stalin, Chavez, never really practiced Marxism. They all somehow got it wrong.
No one says this. Literally no one says. I've never met a single Marxist. Okay, I say no. Okay, right. So there are two points to this. Okay, what they're trying to imply is the idea that, you know, again, this is coming back to that original thing where Marxism is just this list of things that we need to tick off, and then we have communism and blah blah blah, and these people just haven't implemented it right. That's not what people say or leftists say at all, right? You can come at the idea of like, oh well, they didn't understand Marxist theory in a lot of ways, and you know what? I'm willing to say that, yeah, Stalin, for instance, if you take a look at his works, like the economic problems under the USSR, no, there are massive distortions of Marx. But it doesn't matter, because even if Stalin had his Marxist theories like completely on point, the USSR still would have turned out in the same way. The reasons for the USSR and other countries being the way that they were is incredibly complex and nuanced, and honestly deserves, well, I say it deserves this whole other video. It's something that is constantly debated within the left and with historians and blah blah blah. It's a huge topic, but nobody goes around and say, oh well, if these people had just read Marx correctly, then everything would have been different. It would have been utopia, blah blah blah. No one says that. So it's just dishonest to imply that people do. But I don't really know why I'm bothering to point out that White PragerU are dishonest. But you get what I'm saying, right? It's not the point that we're trying to make it all. It's way more complex than that. So just, yeah.
Marxism, we are told, is at its essence about sharing what we have, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs, as Marx put it. Maybe that sounds good to you, but what does it mean? Who determines ability? Who determines need? The answer is the state, the ruling elite.
And again, we're coming back now with this main point that they asserted at the start about, you know, Marxism being the 10 pillars of communism, and that's socialism. They've already convinced you of that, so now they can take these other well-known quotes from each according to blah 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 and start asserting that the state is somehow involved. But again, under the Marxist definition, and again, you may want to define socialism as fucking Bernie Sanders, I don't give a shit, but if we're talking specifically about Marx, then it's fair enough, we need to be consistent with our definitions here. But anyway, this state of society that Marx is describing, from each according to his ability, blah blah blah, specifically exists without a state. Like, explicitly is said, this society is meant to exist without a state. So then for PragerU to come in and say, oh, well, the state clearly is the one that organizes this, well, it's like, no, that's just, again, you're trying to talk about Marx's ideas. It's just wrong. Any society that exists with a state cannot exist by the principle from each according to his ability, blah blah blah, for a multitude of reasons, which again deserves its own video again. But so this is coming back to that original point, right? When they've already kind of set you up to understand Marxism in this very rigid and narrow view, when they lay it out as a blueprint for society rather than what it actually is, a scientific analysis of capitalism and literally nothing more, then they can just extrapolate with all this bullshit that unfortunately conservatives will just eat up, and it saddens me. But what are you gonna do but shout about it on the internet, I guess.
Karl Marx never had to face the consequences of his theories. He lived most of his adult life breathing the free air of London, England, living off the generosity of his collaborator and patron, Engels, who, as it happens, inherited his money from his wealthy merchant father.
Ah, you oppose capitalism, yet you participate in it. Very curious.
Marx spent his days in the reading room of the British Museum, researching and writing. Although he was obsessed with the term scientific, he was never able to marshal data to prove his theories.
What?
There's a good reason for this. There was no data to prove his theories.
What the fuck?
For all his time in the library, Marx couldn't find any evidence to suggest that capitalism, the free exchange of goods and services through privately owned business, was a passing phase.
This is literally the most wrong statement I have ever heard in my entire life. Where do you even begin with it? There is a lot to unpack here, as they might say. Let's just try and take a step back here for a moment. Okay, so what was Marx even trying to analyze to begin with, and get all this data for? Mainly, primarily history and historical anthropology and like how societies have developed over time. I don't know where you'd get the idea there was no data for that. And then on top of that, existing economics in his own society that he was living in. Don't know how you can say there was no data for that. I mean, Marx was like heavily influenced by like Ricardo and Adam Smith and things like that. So to say that Marx had no data for his theories is to say that Adam Smith and Ricardo had no data for their theories either. And then the second point for there being no evidence for capitalism just being a passing phase, and notice how they conveniently swap out the definition of what capitalism is, like sleight of hand there, differing from what Marx was actually researching. But anyway, this claim is also just equally as baseless, because all Marx did, he just observed current society, took the starting point of the commodity, something that we can't deny exists, goods with uses for us that we exchange for money and profit, and then just took other very plainly observant facts about society to make predictions based on there. It's as close to a scientific theory as you can get, really. You may not agree with the predictions, but the evidence is literally just taking things that exist in society and then using reasoning to talk about the flow and of society and where it's going to lead. Again, disagree with the reasoning all you like, but evidence was literally just the society that Marx lived in, and looking at what that society had done throughout history. It's just history, dude. Like, what? What?
Throughout the industrial age, working conditions constantly improved and wealth expanded.
Just gonna throw in real quickly that Marx fully was aware of this and wrote about this at length, and talked about how actually capitalism was one of the most amazing human achievements for this very reason.
Marx had to rely on outdated reports to make his case. And even then, he had to manipulate the data to get it to conform to his predetermined theories.
H1, please don't flag me.
His ends could be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. All existing social conditions. That's religion, family, personal possessions, freedom, and democracy.
I am coming for that toothbrush.
But since few people give up their liberties and property voluntarily, creating a Marxist state has always required guns, prisons, and summary executions.
And guess what creating liberal states has required throughout history as well? Violence and guillotines and fucking violent revolution. This is not unique to Marxist revolutions. This is just how society works. When there's violent conflict between two diametrically opposed sections of society, it can only amount in violence that eventually will lead to a radically reforming of society. This is just basic history. This is the data and evidence that Marx is basing this shit on. If you're against violent revolution, then you have to be against liberalism as well. Because what do you think the French Revolution was in that Enlightenment period, right?
Marx's many disciples from Lenin on never considered this a problem. Some, like revolutionary poster boy Che Guevara, considered it a bonus. I don't need proof to execute a man, Che is said to have boasted. I only need proof that it's necessary to execute him.
I think this only could have been better if they just ended it with, I'm gonna make Stalin look like a fucking anarchist. So that's the PragerU video. I really hope everybody enjoyed this. I enjoyed making another response video because it's been so long, and oh my god, they are so much fun. So I mean, if you did, then obviously, you know, give me that like. But at the very least, you know, like, leave a comment on your thoughts if you disagree with me with anything. I'm sure I got some stuff wrong because obviously this is incredibly off the cuff. I mean, if you guys prefer that, I'd actually appreciate some feedback on how you feel about these kinds of videos, because I really enjoy making them. They're obviously a lot easier to make, and if they're still like as enjoyable and as fun, then that's nice to know because I can keep them up. And obviously I'm always going to have the more properly laid out videos because I mean, I personally want those anyway. But if I know that every now and then I can just bat out one of these, then I'm happy with that. But anyways, so yeah, if you are a conservative as well, I do applaud you for having watched to the end of the video, and please stop watching PragerU. Just like, be a conservative if you really want to be, but just stop watching PragerU. Just stop it. Stop. But anyways, I hope everybody enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all next time. Bye. So real quickly at the end here, I just thought I'd throw in that we've hit 20,000 subscribers now officially, which is just mental. And to celebrate that fact, I'm going to be doing a Q&A response video on this main channel at some point. Now, I have actually already announced it on my second channel, which is where people are leaving their questions and comments. And I said I'd have it out by now, the response, but that's before I had the idea that actually I could just throw it in at the end of this video and give people more of a chance to get their questions in. So go over to my second channel. I'll probably throw the link in like the description of the comments or something, and leave whatever questions you have on that video, and I will probably get back to them in about a week or so. We'll see how it goes. I have assignments in that right now, but yeah, that's coming. So go get your questions on there. And yeah, thank you so much for 20,000 subscribers, and thank you so much for watching the video as well. I love you all. So yeah.